Welcome to the latest episode of our podcast series for financial advisors. Today's episode is An Ex-Merrill Leader's Vision Comes to Fruition. John Thiel on Making the Advisor the Value Proposition. It's a conversation with the founder and executive chairperson of Indivisible Partners. I'm Mindy Diamond, and this is the Diamond Podcast for financial advisors. John, I can't thank you enough for making yourself available today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So a lot to unpack. You are kind of a famous guy in the industry, certainly in the wirehouse world. But for those unfamiliar or those who might have forgotten, tell us a little bit about yourself. You know, some of your career highlights prior to launching what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, I may go back a bit because I think it's relevant to what we're going to talk about. So I started my career in public accounting, and that included both audit and tax. So I did 3 tax seasons. It's relevant when you think about what we're going to talk about. I then got recruited into the insurance business, where I really spent a lot of time on estate planning and some of the nuances of that, all learning, trying to get better. Not something I looked for, but something that I went to. Somebody always said, "Why did you do that?" I said, "Well, I did my friend's tax return. And he made 9 times as much as I did, and I worked a lot harder in public accounting." So I took him up on his offer, and then was then recruited 3 years later to Merrill Lynch, where I saw a much broader, complete way to serve clients beyond just risk management, and joined Merrill Lynch in 1989, where I was a financial advisor for almost 6 years. They started pestering me to go into management right away, but I was younger. And I really like to formulate compensation, and, leadership doesn't provide for that, but an advisor does. And I enjoyed that. And ultimately, though, I looked around and thought that maybe I could make a bigger impact as a leader than an advisor. We had so many incredible advisors and productive people that it just, I just wanted to accept the challenge to lead. And then, as you can imagine, went through as a complex manager. I went out to San Francisco to start a region for what we now call private wealth what they call private wealth management, then was invited back to run that for the country in 2006. And in 2011, I took over not only that, but the entire wealth management business at Merrill Lynch.
So we'll get more into your career at Merrill and why and when you left and all of that. But I want to just say, I have to make one comment. I too started my career in public accounting. I was so incredibly ill-suited for it. I worked for what was Ernst & Whinney in the day, yep. Which, working Big 8 public accounting was like the quintessential you had arrived. I hated it. And I too found my way, obviously, to doing something that was more soulful. So we share that. The second thing I want to comment on is that back in the day, when they tapped you to step out of being a financial advisor and step into management, it was at a time in the industry where it was an honor to step into management. It was the pinnacle of your career. It meant something. I think today it's not that it's probably not any less of an honor. I think that we honor the leaders. We need strong leaders, but in a lot of cases, management in the wirehouse world in particular have become sort of the front line of vulnerability. They're tagged with everybody else's problems and mistakes. They're forced to drink the Kool-Aid and sort of serve that Kool-Aid, even if they don't believe in it. I'm wondering how you'd respond to that.
Well, I think you're right. In those days, which was a long time ago, it was really an honor. I think it's still an honor to lead people at any level. So I wouldn't say that that's not the case. It was well perceived. There was a very rigid qualification process in that system that you had to go through and pass. And so there was a barrier to entry. There was also a compensation advantage for most, given that productivity back then in the late 80s and early 90s was probably under 200,000 or 150,000 per financial advisor. So there was a compensation bump, if you will. And of course, now as productivity grew and everything else, that compensation gap closed and was surpassed by being a financial advisor. And then I just think the complexities of the business and the more that we started to do for people, it required a very broad skill set, including coaching skills. And I think became quite a job. And, then as financial pressures increase to grow margins, where's the place that typically companies go to look? It's middle management. And, when you're out in the field, that's sort of where you are.
Yeah, I think well said. I think that, look, for many people, being a leader at a major firm is soulful. And if that's the case, that's wonderful. But we talk with an awful lot of managers like yourself that are sort of part of this diaspora, not only of financial advisors leaving the traditional space to look for something more entrepreneurial, but more and more leaders. And there are many like you. So, again, we'll come back to that in a little while, but I appreciate your perspective on that. All right, so let's talk about Indivisible Partners, your baby, your vision. What is it? What's its value proposition? And how does it differ from what's become and becoming a really crowded and competitive marketplace?
Yeah. So let's start with why we did what we did. There was a general observation, and when I say we, it's really 7 years ago. My COO, John Hogarty, and I both retired, and we were, doing various things. He was doing some consulting. I, joined a couple boards in the industry and doing well. We just really felt like a couple things. One, that there was a little more work to do as it related to helping clients understand the purpose of their wealth and help advisors see to it that the clients have their best chances to receive to achieve their desired outcomes. But fundamentally, though, we felt like the advisor, especially through a lot of existential events that really were not their making, were that maybe they weren't being supported to the extent or highlighted to the extent that they had been. And we just felt like it was time to put the advisor, who we believe is the value proposition in this industry. In fact, we would suggest that the relationship between the advisor and the client is the most enduring in business, and for sure the most enduring in financial services. We want to put that advisor back in the limelight and support and compensate that advisor for that value that they bring. That is really what it is. It isn't necessarily, it's not a product that makes a difference. It's that financial advisor. So in thinking of that, our broad sort of grand idea is to redefine what advice means. We believe that advice, and we've done a lot of work on this, is actually the advisor's ability to help their clients make quality decisions every time that ultimately lead to the desired outcome that client has for those resources. So that every decision actually matters. And that if we can increase the quality of that decision, we give our clients a much better chance of achieving what it is they want with their wealth.
So I like that a lot, but couldn't an advisor sitting at Merrill Lynch or an advisor sitting at any independent firm or an advisor at Raymond James or fill in the blank, any firm, do that? Help, and wouldn't they say they do that, help clients to make quality decisions?
Well, I would just suggest that the tools that really allow that to happen are just coming to market. So you think it would be hard to say that you can, because if you think about asset liability matching and thinking about future needs as a liability, and then really trying to immunize that liability, there are not any tools in any of those places that I know of that exist that help the advisor do that.
So that's a good time to ask, what kind of tools? Maybe you can.
They're planning tools. They're tax algorithmic software that allows you to not only understand what your after-tax returns are, but what's the impact of asset location. If you have to make a withdrawal, where is the best place to make that withdrawal? And then what's the subsequent impact on your asset allocation? Those are really sophisticated tools that are just coming to market, and they're, to my knowledge, not yet integrated anywhere.
And will they be integrated? So as
Eventually.
come to market, will they be available to an advisor at Merrill or Morgan or UBS?
Yeah, and let's just be clear. Our philosophy is not to create something other people don't have. Our philosophy is to create something and then share it with the world so that clients in general have a better shot of doing it. We're not building this to keep everybody away. We really want to demonstrate how it can be done and then democratize it for all those people that need our help. I mean, Mindy, I don't want to get on a social rant, but if half the people are going to rely on Social Security for their retirement income, we have a social issue down the road. And so the more that we can help these people now and help everyone think about what the purpose of their wealth is and then what's the best way to get there, that's pretty profound. And that's very, in my mind, that's a legacy. And so part of what we're trying to do is to help with that.
Yeah. So, what's interesting about that statement is that if you talk to most top advisors in the traditional space, so those practicing at the firm you came from and beyond, they think they really believe they have everything they need. They have no idea that they're missing anything. So, what would you say to them? Like, what are they missing specifically? And so, an advisor that sits at Morgan Stanley that believes that they have great planning tools and great asset allocation tools and great technology and great, by the way, access to investment banking and credit and lending and private investments and whatever else they need, don't really believe that they're missing anything. And look, I get your job isn't to even try and convince everyone that they're wrong. That's not the goal here. But for those listening, what are they missing? Where do they have that wrong?
So all I would suggest, and I am not here to tell anybody they're wrong, and if they're doing that well for every one of their clients, then God bless you. It's just a shining example of what works. I don't think that you can say that about everybody in the industry. So what we really want to suggest is that, so it's been 7 years. The amount of innovation that's occurred in the fintech space that has yet to even be integrated in any of the platforms or is just in the process of being doing is you might not know what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So that I'd agree with totally. And I think what we are finding, and I think one of the greatest joys of my job is to educate people, not to convince them, not to sell them, not to push or manipulate them by any means, but to say, if you are beginning to get curious or sort of feel an incongruence somewhere along the line or wondering if there's something better out there, as a fiduciary to clients, you have a responsibility to understand how the world has evolved, even if it's for no other reason than just to make sure that you do, in fact, have everything you need to do it best where you are.
And just imagine if we were at a world where everybody had what was quote unquote best and they were able to deliver for their clients, knowing that that relationship between the advisor and the client is really incredibly powerful. We would accomplish our goal, which is ultimately to ensure and assist advisors in their ability to help their clients actually accomplish what they want, the client wants with their wealth. And
Yeah.
it can happen everywhere. We're okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah. So help me to understand and help our listeners to understand Indivisible. Advisors join as 1099 independents, as employees. Tell us a little bit more about that construct or infrastructure.
They join a partnership as a partner firm. They would create their own LLC, and so that they would have their own business. They would own 100% of that business, and they would operate that business with, obviously the revenue they achieve, and then what we would call sort of direct expenses that they would incur on their own. There are expenses that we as a partnership in the center, if you will go out and acquire at scale that no one business could accomplish by themselves. Think compliance and supervision and some of those. So sorry about that. Think about compliance and supervision. Think about some of the insurance that's necessary, payroll benefits, things like that, where if we can go out and negotiate a much better technology, seat costs, things like that, licenses, So then that would just be attributed to them, but they would come in as their own business and they would become a partner in Indivisible Partners. So they own their own business. They will also be granted profit interests in Indivisible Partners so that they will also own a piece of the broader partnership. In effect, because it's a sum of the parts business, they would own a piece of everybody else's business and everybody else would own a piece of theirs as we grow it.
Yep. Okay, so as the ecosystem born to support the breakaway advisor has grown, and it's grown a lot, there are a lot of models that sound similar. One that comes to mind might be New Edge Partners. The Rob Sechan launched, so the big ex UBS launched business based out of New York that does something similar where advisors join, they get equity in the overall entity. They can either be independent or W 2 employees. It's a business built on scale, so advisors can leverage economies of scale and be part of the whole sum of the parts business. Models that might be similar, a sanctuary or a dynasty, they all sort of get there differently, but at the end of the day, sort of offering similar value propositions. So help us to differentiate it. How does it differ?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to go back to what we're trying to do is build the most effective ecosystem for financial advisors. There may be somebody that is as effective. That's okay with us. Again, as I mentioned before, what we're trying to do is one, we wanted to create an environment where we gave as much efficiency to the advisor and their team in the practice as possible. One thing we did do very well, this leadership team, 10 of my founders, is operate huge businesses at scale, which has allowed us to learn and then bring that scaled approach down to a much smaller universe. So think about just all the workflow that goes into their platform, their CRM being integrated, being designed for financial advisors, not for enterprise businesses, and then trying to be shaped and twisted to try to fit an advisor's practice. We have a lot of experience with that, and it didn't go well. So think about that. Then think about collaboration. One of the things that I know as a client of the industry doesn't happen the way it should. And this is feedback, by the way, Mindy, that I got from our ultra high net worth clients as far back as 2006, is that the ability to collaborate as a client with your advisor in the planning tools and the like is almost zero. And as a sophisticated client, and I put myself in that category, I know a lot about what we do and how we do it. But if somebody's worth $200 or $300 million, to suggest that they're not capable of going in and running scenario analysis in events like we're going through today. Think about last night after what has been, a lot of volatility, then another, big downturn. Would you want to go in at 10 o'clock at night and make sure you still have enough to achieve everything that you set out to achieve? That's the real world, and that's hard to do on any platform. So that collaboration potential, then customization. So what I mean by that is the platform that we chose, Advise On, allows for the advisor and their team to customize their landing page to what is they want to see. It doesn't have to be a firm view. It is what's important to them. So think of a client associate coming in, wants to see something very different than the financial advisor who's a CFA, who's running, their proprietary model. And then the last thing, and that customization then applies to the client. And so that client then with their advisor can design their landing page in the portal for that client to see what it is they want to see versus us deciding for them as an organization. Because there's as many opinions as there are people. We want to accomplish that. We want to capture their preferences and let them participate the way they want to participate. And these are all things that I've learned as a very informed client.
Yeah. Yeah. So, a comment on that. I think that there's plenty of room for everyone. that even if, as you say, there are things about Indivisible that are similar to New Edge and similar enough to Sanctuary and Dynasty and whoever else it may be, that's okay. I actually think that the more competition there is in the industry, the better it is for clients, the better it is for advisors, the better it is for the industry as a whole. So bring it on, as far as I'm concerned. I think that that's a good thing. And I think a lot of times what will differentiate for the advisor who's confused and overwhelmed as they go out to look at this, as this ecosystem has built, is they're going to meet the leaders. And it's going to be, some may like Rob Sechin more than they like John Thiel, and vice versa. And a lot of it just comes down to sort of who they resonate with more. So I think that's a good thing. But since economics matter a lot, in this crowded sea, in this crowded marketplace of options. Tell me a little bit about, I read on your site and you told me offline, the goal is obviously to create a compelling economic package for the right advisors. And so 100%, they're going to own equity, but what does the rest of compelling look like? And how about cash?
Yeah. So just remind, they own their business forever, right? So whatever happens, we don't tether them to us. If they want to get up and leave, that's okay. It means we didn't do our job. We didn't, serve them the way that we designed it to be served. So that's their number one asset. Think about it, right? The valuations that you see as RAs are consumed or sold or transitioned, especially in the independent space, they're quite compelling. And a business that's growing is going to have a higher valuation than a business that's not. And we'll talk about that, I hope, later, about our ability to help them grow. So I think that's a really important thing. The economics, though, consist of a monthly payout on revenue plus a profit share at the end of the year. The profit share is designed for every team to hit. So, that's going to determine the kind of advisor team that is interested in our platform. And then, so that adds up to, a significant percentage of the revenue. So that, again, the lion's share goes to the advisor. And then that profit sharing unit, if we hit our plan, and we intend to hit our plan, and it is by no means in a very aggressive plan, the distributions off that equity grant can grow to as much as 10% of their revenue. Mm-hmm. So it's a cash flow asset, which is one of the things that I've learned in retirement, that you retire on your balance sheet and it's wonderful, but turning that into cash flow is not quite as easy as all the asset managers might suggest it is.
Right.
And there's a lot of friction when you're trying to do that, like taxes and.
So I guess the comment I would make is that this model and models like it are definitely not for everyone.
No.
Because any advisor that's looking to really maximize cash flow, short-term upside, get the most amount of cash for their business up front, is never going to gravitate toward a model like this. Even though in the long term, who wouldn't want to grow faster? Who wouldn't want a better valuation for the business? But it's not for them. So those folks who want to maximize in the short term will either jump from Merrill to Morgan or UBS or some other traditional firm. Or there are models in the independent space, the independent broker-dealer world, some supported models of independence that will monetize a certain amount of cash in the short term. But it sounds like that's not what this is.
That's not what this is. And the teams that we talk to, that we share our point of view with, many of them agree with our assessment. Some don't, as you suggest. Right? Exactly. And that's okay. There's plenty of room for everybody. There's 600,000 registered reps and hundreds of thousands of registered investment advisors. So there's plenty of people that think about it one way or the other, and it's okay.
So it'll be self-selecting, because many that you might be interested in are not going to be interested in you. You're right. But who are you targeting, and how many? Like, what does it look like in terms of an ideal size?
So our financial plan is like I said, is pretty conservative. We're looking to probably get somewhere, if we look 5 years out, 60 teams, 10 years out, maybe double that. Again, want it to be around the people that understand what we're trying to accomplish, that are looking for an opportunity to own their business, own their growth, and then ultimately transition that business really successfully, not only for themselves, but the other two constituents that get left out a lot of times in the decision making on succession are your succeeding FAs and the advisors as to what it costs them and how they're set up for the future. But the one that's really forgotten is us, the client. Like we get forgotten about. Like as you begin to think about that, who are you going to introduce me to? And if you're going to introduce me to somebody 6 months before you exit, it's likely that I'm going to go out and look for other opportunities because that doesn't feel right. So to us, succession is a really important challenge going forward to do it well and to do it right. I mean, McKinsey has suggested, and I'm not going to argue with their math because I agree with them. It's in the next decade, 100,000 advisors are going to exit the industry. How many clients is that? If it was 150, so that's 15 million. Like there's endless number of opportunities to do this right or to do it less than, in a client focused way. And so we want to help the advisors prepare for that and do that well so that they do well, the succeeding advisor does well, and most importantly, the client does well.
Right. So are you targeting primarily wirehouse advisors, private wealth teams, high net worth teams, or are you looking to buy businesses that are already independent? Who do you think will join you?
Well, we're looking at people that obviously want to be a fiduciary. We are going to be investment advisory only. We are not going to be duly registered. We won't be a broker dealer.
Okay.
We don't need brokerage, in our opinion. You can have a non-discretionary fee-based account and accomplish what you need to in that regard. If you think about the capabilities that are typically seen as transactional, like structured product, even outside in the insurance world, annuities, that's all available in a fee-based wrapper with a lot of the internal costs and conflicts stripped out. So we just think that sitting on the same side of the table as your client in every solution set is the right way to go. So that's number one. Two, we really are looking for people who understand the concept of values-based pricing. We hear constantly that fees are under pressure. Fees are under pressure when there's an absence of value. But if you look at the best teams in this industry, they have pricing power because they're delivering value. And we did a lot of work around this. And I'll never forget a meeting where I put some clients up in front of a group of advisors. And, advisors love to ask other clients questions, right? Other people's clients questions. And this guy goes up, yeah, I hear all this, but is it fees or is it service? And it's a very affluent woman from the Midwest leaned over her chair and said, it's trust. It's trust. Like you don't understand it. And so we're looking for people that understand that they have to deliver value. And if they deliver value, there's pricing power. Credentialed advisors, we think, are really important. This is a profession, or should be as much as possible a profession. And it's great for clients to understand. And I'm not saying everybody has to go out and get credentialed, but the team has to have that capability because I think it just points to a commitment to continuing education, a code of ethics, a business standard that as people try to evaluate who to work with, it kind of helps you, demonstrate to clients that there's a standard, right? And then they've got to have a really disciplined, we would like them to have a disciplined investment process. It doesn't matter what that discipline is, but you can't manage 17 varieties of investment approaches. It's really hard to do, especially if you think about markets like this. And then one of the things that doesn't get talked about often enough, and technology has afforded this, and it's a big part of what we've done at Indivisible Partners, is the service component, because it is a big differentiator. If you actually ask clients, who they speak to the most, it's typically not the advisors, it's typically the team. And that service is really important when a wire has to go out or something, something has to happen. But instead of categorizing clients in, hey, they're a platinum or a gold or that stuff used to really frustrate me as a client. And it's to capture that each client's individual preferences for service. And then the great thing about technology and an embedded CRM, you can automate the delivery of their preferences so that you can come in every day, knowing without having to lay awake and think about it at night what the service standard is for those clients that are going to be impacted that day. That's an enormous efficiency gain for the team. And it's like the ultimate compliment to a client that, hey, you heard me, you listened to me. So for instance, me personally, I don't need a quarterly business review. I follow the markets. I understand. I look at my account online, and I have a general sense. And so once or twice a year, let's look at the benchmarks and, but more importantly, I'd like to know from a cash flow perspective, am I okay month to month? That's way more important to me.
Yeah. Yeah. John, so tell me a little bit about your leadership team, those you've chosen to surround yourself with. Are they people from Merrill? Where'd they come from? Who are they?
Yeah. So one of the important elements of what we're trying to build is a culture of shared success. And that starts with the leadership team. 8 of us operated together at some point in time at a former firm and did it effectively. Interestingly, we were all on to our next season away from the wealth management industry. Some people were doing consulting. Some people were on boards. Some people were still involved. But we sort of got together as people, retired over the last few years and kept in contact. And this idea was germinating. And it turns out that, we have a lot of expertise. So it's myself, John Hogarty, who's COO, was the COO for many years. Mike Adornetto ran operations and services and was the COO. Alok Kapoor was the head of tech infrastructure, not only at Merrill Lynch, but at Fidelity for the last 12 years. Steve Hostetler worked in our strategy group. So, and then obviously Tom Fickinger, Paul Lambert, Bill Lorenz all worked for me, and we ran the wealth management business together. So there's this working relationship of how we've operated. And by the way, I would argue we operated in maybe the industry's toughest moments. Think, early 2000s, think the great financial crisis, think all those, a major acquisition, all those things, I think really bonded us. So we have this great working and relationship and respect. And then other people that we knew that came from Fidelity, Peter Siesko, Tom Core spent time there. Peter's been in the asset management industry, Citigroup way in the back. But these are people with incredible connections in the industry, incredible operating experience. All really wanted to go to do this thing, right? To build something that we think is really special. And again, it isn't about being different. It's about doing it as effectively as possible. And we think this team gives us the best chance to do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about the advisors that work for Indivisible. So we are recording this in mid-April, and it looks like as of this recording, there's one team on platform that joined you when you launched the firm, which I think was the beginning of 2020.
January. Yep.
Yeah. So first of all, tell us about that team. It's hard to be the first and only. So tell us what they saw, why they chose to join, what it's like to be the only, and sort of what the pipeline looks like.
Yeah, I think that they were at a situation in their career. They're, I don't want to say younger. They're younger than a lot of people. I would say they're mid-career, and both of them are highly credentialed, and they were ready to really initiate a major growth phase in their business. So that required some flexibility on the ability to pursue business owners and things like they're both certified exit planning advisors, as an example. One is a CFA, one is a CFPWA, and has a CIMA resignation. So they're very committed professionally. But they really wanted to look for more autonomy and flexibility in how they might grow. And, we can provide that. Obviously, they wanted to own their growth. They wanted to own their business. So that was something that was an important element to that. They know us. So they wanted the benefit of this, experienced team, 300 years. I know it sounds like doesn't mean a lot, but you can read our resumes and you can see the results that we produced. It's all public. So they were very confident in our ability to help them, grow their business as well as structure their business and then support them. They were thrilled when they saw sort of the evolution of capabilities that have come through the evolution of the incredible investment in the fintech space. And so tools that they really felt could help them deliver what they want for their clients. So it's just a combination of that. And fundamentally they trust us. So
Yeah.
that's why they did it. And thank them for that, because first is hard.
First was hard for sure. And so how much of that, I mean, because as we're talking about, there are other firms that offer similar, not necessarily the same, but similar value propositions. Have to assume they might have looked at some of those other firms. So how much do you think that early responders, so future early joiners, will join because they know the leaders, they know you?
I think it'll be know or get to know quickly or know of. It will. I would suggest probably everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the good news is we know a lot of people. I don't know how this happened, but I have 100 and almost 119,000 followers on LinkedIn.
Amazing.
So when you go and look, you're like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
that helps. But
Of
I think
course.
that's a consequence of treating people well.
Well, yeah, you're not only a well-known name in the industry, even though you've been out of it somewhat for 7 years, but you did it the right way. So, a reputation of being an advisor's advisor, and people like that. And so I think that that's great. What does the pipeline look like? Like, how long do you think it'll take you to get the next one and the next five after that?
Well, that's one of the things, this better than anybody. If anybody thinks that it's a precise science and that you can just gather data and predict how long it would take and who's going to come when,
Yeah.
I would love for you to share that with me, because
Especially in volatile markets.
in volatile markets.
Now we're recording again mid-April, and markets have been crazy. And even advisors that are feeling the most amount of pain, and certainly they're going to leave, even they are finding it hard to think about jumping ship in the midst of craziness and uncertainty.
Yeah. I mean, and then it's not just now, it's policy uncertainty. So it's not necessarily going to just go away because PEs align to what's historically normal. I mean, it's kind of uncharted territory, right? I mean, it's really is uncharted. So yeah, but we have a very robust pipeline, and we think that it will come to fruition. We have, two teams joining us over the next couple months, which that will, become public when it's appropriate. And then we have conversations with a lot of different people. And to your point, is we're targeting people who are looking to own their own business, have the autonomy they need, the flexibility they need, and maybe most importantly, the support that
Mhm.
they need. I mean, one of the things that we knew when we did this, because we know a lot of people in the industry. There were people that had gone and fully independent, and maybe the strain of being the general manager and the financial advisor becomes too much at some point in time, and they'd like to give some of that up and spend more time with clients. There are people who are with organizations that probably didn't deliver exactly what they suggested, and maybe there are pain points, or equity didn't come to fruition. There's almost as many reasons why people would look as there are teams. But I think, and then obviously, the fact of the matter is, if people are trying to go independent for the first time, that's another,
Yeah,
set.
for sure. John, I want to pivot to your decision to leave Merrill 7 years ago. So, what can you share with us about why you stepped down, why you left, what you've been doing since then, et cetera?
So it was 2015. It was particularly stressful, if you go back, because not only were we evolving as an organization, but Labor Secretary Perez was suggesting that we should all go to a fiduciary standard. So there was, enormous back and forth in the industry around, that, right, as to whether we should just declare and go fiduciary. And I was a supporter of it, not because I didn't believe in brokerage, because I believed if we're going to get to the future, let's get to the future faster, right? And it didn't ultimately come to fruition, and that's okay. but we were prepared if it were. And I believe in it because that's the approach we're taking today to do that. But more, more specifically to your question, I was very much a proponent of wellness and making sure that people not only that they when they came to work that this job has a lot of stress and that they were okay. And unfortunately, in our industry, that stress creates a lot of behaviors that are unhealthy, and there's an enormous amount of stress that strain relationships. And I always felt like if we were ever going to be the organization that we could be, that we would have to help people with those realities. And so I put a big focus on wellness. And I brought in nutritionalists. Instead of going on club trips to Hawaii, I offered, trips to Canyon Ranch and things like that to go get well, to Deepak Chopra's center, things like that, and literally people made fun of me in the media. And I'm like, oh, that's okay. That's okay, because I have 2 boxes of thank you notes from people about caring about their own wellness and things like that. Well, that affected my wellness too. And I actually had gone for a physical to my concierge doctor, Dr. Henry Lodge, who wrote the book Younger Next Year. Just an amazing man, tragically died of prostate cancer at 58. But I went in and he said, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "What came from my physical?" He goes, "You don't have to come every year." I'm like, "Really? I thought I should." He goes, "No, you're not the typical, you're okay." I said, "Yeah, okay. Well, I came here because I want to make sure this job isn't going to kill me." And so he said, "Okay." We went through the whole physical, and it was a stressful day. And I came back, and I'm being very vulnerable here, Mindy. So
I appreciate it.
I hope you understand that. And I came back, and he said, "Listen, John, if you do this job a few more years, you'll be fine." He said, "If you do this job 5 more years, you can do serious damage to your health." And I thought to myself, like, wow, all these things I'm saying, right? And then along that same line, I came home one night. This was the number one reason. And my wife said, because I was never home, she goes, and I've been married, it'll be 42 years in July. I'm lonely, John. And I was like, oh my God, all I could picture is my tombstone, saying his wife was lonely. And so those, and then, just tired of the regulatory pressure. We were part of a bank. And so coming out of the crisis, we had 7 regulators, and it just, didn't add up. All those things together. It was not that I wasn't committed to the advisors and to the organization. It was like, it's time to hand over the keys to somebody else and let them have a go. And that's why I did it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, not only with vulnerability, but honesty. And I imagine there's a lot of people that feel like you feel, but it's hard to give it up. It's hard to give it up because you're making a lot of money. It's hard to give it up because you're at the pinnacle of your career. It's hard to give it up because there's ego involved. So what has the last 7 years looked like? And were you worried that coming back into it now, building Indivisible now, people would still find you relevant after 7 years out?
Well, I felt like if they would give me a chance and listen to me, that they would find out that I was. And I stayed relevant, one, by being, being very engaged client. I still help people that, want my help about how they structure their business and the things they need to do it. I joined Franklin Resources Board. So I've stayed, very close, obviously, from in the asset management side. I joined the non-traded REIT board of Cohen and Steers. So I'm very much engaged in that side of the industry. And I felt like if people really looked and saw that it wouldn't be such a big issue. And people still sought me out for my point of view on certain things. So yes, there's always a risk you're not relevant anymore. And I'm sure to some people I may not be, but that's okay. If we sit down and talk, I think you'll find out it's quite the opposite. And then, what, so one of the things I did is I worked with a company. It's Mark Lenz, who was the former treasurer of Bank of America, and I got really close. He left and started this business where we help retiring executives transition successfully into what next. Everything but finances, no financial, just behavioral, getting ready, dealing with the emotional cliff that you walk off of, so to speak, going from the C-suite to Joe Lunch Bucket. And it's really quite a journey. And I went through it myself. It was very important to me. It helped me very much. They asked me to get involved, and I did. And so I've worked with a lot of retiring executives from almost any industry you can think of. And it's been personally very meaningful and rewarding for me. And I know I've made a difference because they have said as much. Um, and it's a very vulnerable part of your life. And so thinking about leaving at the top of your game, those are the kinds of things that are available out there to make sure that whatever's next is just as meaningful personally as what was before. So
I love that, John. First of all, I would have been one of those people if you sent me to Canyon Ranch or Deepak Chopra's ranch. I'd have much preferred that than to a trip to Hawaii, just so you know, so I'm with you. But I do think that one of the things that a lot of advisors find is missing from life in the wirehouse world are leaders with heart, leaders who lead with authenticity, leaders who care about well-being, leaders who aren't just sort of shoveling or serving the Kool-Aid because it's what they're being paid to do, but leaders who really walk the walk and talk the talk. So I think that's really impressive. And I think it's a reason why a lot of people leave the traditional space. But question for you. So you mentioned that one of the things that Indivisible would do would be help advisors who join grow faster. And so I want to ask you a two-part question here. So one is, after all the years in the industry as essentially running wealth management and having a front row to so many successful advisors, what do you think generally advisors need or want most? And to me, that's a leading question because I think that from a professional perspective, they want to grow more unencumbered more than anything, but would love to hear what you think and then how Indivisible is going to help them to do that.
So I think what they want, and they may not articulate this way, is they want a servant leader. They want someone that understands that for everyone to realize the potential of the organization, that they've got to help the advisor. They don't tell the advisor what to do. They actually work in partnership to enhance what it is the advisor wants to do. Of course, we have a regulatory obligation to supervise. We all need to be supervised. That's part of the safety that comes from a regulated environment. But a big component of that is to help them solve problems, help them to get access to other opportunities, to push things through that may not be as simple to do. Think lending and some of the issues around that. To be their advocate, but to be a lock arms and be their partner. I mean, that's always what people told me, is that's what made the difference, is that they realized that I was fighting as hard for them and their business as they were for their business and their clients. And when advisors would call and scream, and it was because their client was not taken care of well, I was 1,000% on their side. And now I don't like bullies who want to scream just to scream. But if it was because the client was being disadvantaged somehow, then I love that passion, right? Be your client advocate. Understand that there's other constituencies, but be your client advocate. So I think that's what they look for. And then they look for our ability to see around corners. See things that they may not have experienced, but I have seen other teams and other places have to deal with. So it's that opportunity set to, have had other experience where this particular issue may have come up somewhere else, but the team that's asking doesn't know anything about it, right? And then they want transparency. Just tell them why and tell them the facts and be transparent about it. And then everybody will make the right decision, and treat them. I always said, treat them like adults. treat them like they're your business partner. In our case, they actually are our business partner. But really, I think just treat people with the respect they're due. And if you're going to build trust, you have to have transparency. So to me, that's a really big part of it. And then, create a service model that really is relevant to them and they understand.
Mm-hmm. So agree with all of that. I'd add a couple of things
Okay.
because I have a front row seat to these folks as
Sure.
well. One is they absolutely want ease of doing business more than anything. The number one thing they complain about is too much bureaucracy and feeling that compensation plans reward them for sometimes the wrong things or incent them to do things that are not necessarily in a client's best interest. And that's where they feel a sense of incongruence. So I'd say ease of doing business, a simple compensation plan that feels congruent and true and relevant and right. But they also really want to grow. No, not everyone does. Plenty of them are complacent where they are, but most top advisors want to grow. They want to grow by having a servant leader, by someone who can see around corners, by having trust, by being part of the right organization, of course. But you mentioned that one of the things that Indivisible will do will help them grow faster. So I'd love to hear specifically how. What is it that this team in Pittsford, New York, that Ex-Merrill, that were the first team to join you, what is it that they heard you say about their, especially because they're relatively young, mid-career, as you say, what is it they're going to be able to do in Indivisible that they couldn't have done while at Merrill?
Well, just think about there's a lot of things, and it would all start kind of with the efficiency of their business. Now, I'm not saying that's going to be the biggest differentiator, but that's a necessary component to growth, is to have a business that runs efficiently, that can accommodate and process growth. So, obviously we have a lot of experience in how to set that up so it's done efficiently, and technology has been a giant enabler for that efficiency. And then once their efficiency is to understand where they have operated well in the past, where have they seen success, and then where are the big addressable pools, where is the marketplace, where are there opportunities for them to differentiate in that, and then make sure that we have the capabilities to enable them to go, and they have the personal capability to deal with the complexities that marketplace, those clients are going to bring. And so us helping align all that, and then very specifically bring a set of tools that are going to enhance their ability to pursue that marketplace. I mean, a great example is everybody talks about the great wealth transfer. It kind of reminds me of in the 90s where you had to be invested in Asia, or you just were going to get left behind. And I'm just a trend skeptic. Now, I do know that everybody's going to die. That one I can agree with for sure. When they're going to die, though, is not going to happen probably as quickly as anybody thinks. And then, hopefully with great planning, that wealth transition goes a lot more smoothly than people suggest. But, famous people would suggest that there's very little planning at all going on. And so that's an addressable market that we think is really important. But no one's talking about how, right? So we're building an ecosystem to go have the tool set to do that. So whether that's wealth.com to make sure, that the estate planning is done well in a way that's consumable. And then obviously surrounding that with wealth strategists and other specialists. It could, it could be making sure that you have addressed from a risk management perspective, those big, what I call Six Sigma tails, those outlier risks that should be funded with insurance and not self-funded, or at least determined. It's valuation tools for all those business owners who are just like all the advisors in our industry. They have an incredible business, but they don't have a great succession plan, and they haven't thought about it with their greatest asset. So there's analogies there. And so making sure that those tools, making sure that the planning tools can incorporate not only what they have and what they owe and what they own, but what they need and what they want, and what they need and what they want expressed as liabilities, and then helping them with the sufficiency of making sure that the assets that they have, including their future earnings potential, all line up for a successful opportunity. So that includes having access to boutique investment banks, because a lot of these businesses aren't going to, the big bulge bracket firms are not going to pay attention to a company selling for 80 or 90 or $100 million or $50 million. But those are incredibly important relationships, for us. So that whole ecosystem can be built. We know how to build it. We're building it. It's probably halfway done, but that's going to be a market that we're going to help people go after. And that's $124 trillion opportunity. So just think about that. And then, being prepared for those succession conversations with the people who don't plan well. And those clients are going to be, perhaps going to be in play. And then all the specialties that everybody else would know about. But we just think that setting up the right business process, having efficient business operations, the capacity to grow, the tools to grow, and the expertise to offset, to face off against the complexities that clients bring, it's a natural opportunity to grow. And what we've seen anecdotally, that people that have gone independent seem to grow faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I think part of why they grow faster is because they're happier. They're sort of doing their own thing. They're doing what's soulful. Things feel congruent again, and they're re-energized.
well, they can create. Listen, it's very difficult in a broker dealer. You can't charge a separate financial planning fee. Well, in the independent space, you can. Right. You could have a consulting contract and you can advise on assets away. It's just a lot easier to do. And we have supervisory responsibility to make sure that they're providing the client what the contract says, but that's a revenue source that they're unable to tap.
Yeah.
Tax advice, things like that. Those are all revenue sources the clients are willing to pay for if it's done well and integrated, because that ultimately saves them money. But there's these new revenue sources that can provide growth as well.
Yep. Yeah. So there's no question that new revenue sources, the ability to charge financial planning fees, a lot of the stuff you mentioned, you can't do if you're sitting in a traditional brokerage firm. But many of the things you're talking about, you can. I mean, I have a feeling that if I were interviewing a UBS manager and he were trying to recruit somebody, he would say the same thing, that we're going to make you more efficient. We're going to retool your practice. We're going to help you to find efficiencies and scale and give you opportunities to grow. And oh, by the way, we've created a succession plan for when you decide you've had enough. At UBS, it's called Alpha. At Merrill, it's CTP. At Morgan, it's FAP. So how big is the differential, I guess, between what a UBS manager, a Merrill manager, a Morgan manager might say to an advisor and what the reality is in the independent space or what you're building?
Well, I can't talk about everybody else. I mean, I have seen some of the independent firms that we've gotten to know. What they do is really differentiating. I mean, including things like bill pay, and I'm not suggesting we want to sign up for that, but the depth of things that they can do just simply can't be done in those environments. But I want those organizations to be able to do all these things, and maybe they can or maybe they can't. I know that we will. Right. And we will do that. And whether we can is different than whether we do it. Right. And that's where we're placing our time and emphasis. And it's actually the part that our co-founders enjoy, is actually doing that work with the teams to help them make sure that they capture that opportunity. It's the fun in what we do.
Yep. Yeah. John, what do you think of these retire in place programs that almost every brokerage firm, large and small, has put into place? So making it so that an advisor doesn't have to jump ship in order to monetize their net worth at day's end, but rather can retire in place and pass the asset on to the next generation.
I mean, I think it was a really important aspect that had to be added. I was part of that, right? So I think it's wonderful that they have that opportunity. And again, what I want to make sure of for me as a client is that that's a really thoughtful handoff. And if it's not a thoughtful handoff, then I don't think, whether it's inside or outside, I don't think it's a worthy process.
Right. So I agree with that. As a client and as someone that advises advisors, what I think that the construct, the notion that the big firms address the fact that an advisor can retire in place and monetize their practice and at the same time pass it on to the next generation was a gift to the industry. It was brilliant and it needed to be done. The problem we find is I think that a lot of people a senior advisor sort of gets to the last 5 years of their career and says it's easiest just to stay and leave my legacy here than to go through the hassle of a move. And then that handoff isn't always as thoughtful, not necessarily what's best for client, not necessarily best for the team, and oftentimes not necessarily best for the next gen who is going to inherit the business.
Well, and that's what I said, if the handoff is thoughtful, because we talked about three constituents: the senior advisor, the acquiring advisor, and the client. And if two out of three of those don't have a great outcome, then I'm not a fan of any program, regardless of the economics.
Yes, I would agree with that. I think well said. Two rapid fire questions. One, do you, given your seat for a long time and 119,000 LinkedIn followers, given your perspective, do you think that the pendulum will continue to swing toward independence? Do you think that more top advisors will opt to leave the big firms? Do you think it'll eventually swing backwards? What do you think the future looks like?
Well, I mean, I'm going to just go with what McKinsey said, right, in their report, the impact on the RIA industry, that they felt like the largest financial institution maybe in the independent space, right? So they've obviously done a lot of work on that. I don't know if that's the case or not. I think there'll always be both opportunities and both models, because there's plenty of people who have clients who have, different points of view. I think about 400 new RIAs get created every month. So the notion that this is a consolidating industry, which I've heard from others, doesn't really bear itself out. I think McKinsey said in their report, 2,000 advisors are joining every year, an existing RIA or starting their own. There's obviously a lot of people who are leaving bigger organizations. There's a lot of people leaving bigger organizations to go independent. So I think that trend is locked in. And what's the big enabler is technology.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
technology, and it's what I'm most pleasantly surprised about is the willingness, and maybe this has something to do with our reputation, but the willingness of the custodians and the platform providers and the point solutions to work with us to shape their offering in what we know is a more effective way for for advisors to interact with them and for clients to consume them, and including spending money on the tech development to make sure that it's set up in a way that's most efficient for the advisor and most satisfying to the client. So that openness, to evolving and learning from people who have operated in the business at scale is really refreshing. I wasn't sure that was going to be the case, because you get engineers in a room and they're brilliant, but they don't really consume things the way you and I do.
Right. Right. But the independent space in general is sort of a more open space. I mean, go to a Fidelity conference or a Schwab conference or a Pershing conference, and you'll see it's all about collaboration. They don't see the RIA next to them as their competitor. They see it as a fellow colleague who can share best practices.
Yep.
One final question. So we're talking at a time, again, some great uncertainty, market volatility. But what are your thoughts on the future of industry? Is the future bright?
Well, I think the future is incredibly bright. I think the notion that it's going to end with the baby boom and then all the money's going to be passed on or whatever, or that the Gen X or Gen Z or millennials aren't going to be interested in this, I just think it's nonsense. Maybe some of the generations took longer to get to where our generation did, whether that's settling down, buying a home or whatever. But, I have a son who told me that he watched me work very hard. And this was in context of him going on a European vacation when he was 26. And I'm like, wow, I couldn't imagine doing that when I'm 26. He goes, Dad, I watched you work so hard and give everything up for us. He said, and I'm so happy that you're well and you're able to enjoy, but we just want to make sure we go have these experiences when we can, and then we'll go work hard and make your money. And I'm like, that's actually probably a pretty good strategy to do it while you can versus to hope and wait. And so I just think that's almost everything that they're doing in their lives is they've got their priorities right, and they will get to all this. And that includes not only, making their way through life and being successful, but entering this industry. specifically, that they will be attracted to what we do. And remember, back in the days when we first started, there was a lot of school teachers and insurance sales and other people entering our business who had a lot of life experience. They weren't recent college graduates. And so entering this business in mid-career is still an incredible opportunity.
You bet. Yeah. John, it has been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm grateful. Thank you for being vulnerable and honest and transparent. Wishing you all the best in this new endeavor and excited to see what you do with it.
Mindy, thank you so much. It's been an honor. I appreciate it.
As a financial advisor, you hold yourself to the highest standards of integrity, honesty, and credibility. You are successful because you take your professional responsibilities seriously and are dedicated to your clients. But are you living your best business life? Are your goals aligned with your firm's, or could a better option exist? Should I Stay or Should I Go is a book written with you in mind. It's a self-guided journey that walks you through the key steps that we take with our advisor clients. This strategic thought process and roadmap to professional self-discovery is designed to help you ask the right questions and think critically and objectively, whether you're considering change or not. Learn how to get your copy at diamond-consultants.com/thebook.